Walnut and the Coach,
Whoa,
season
whoa,
one.
whoa, 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 whoa. Well, then I'm Walnut. Wait, you're the coach?
You want to
Which
switch
one is
roles here?
which one is which?
I'm Walnut and you're the coach, buddy. Unless you want to do it, an identity switch here on us.
Well, no. I'll take the coach role for today. But
Beautiful. I think you are well suited to the coach role, my friend. Absolutely. Absolutely. So Walnut and the Coach, season one, episode two. Honored to be here with my dear friend, brother, and mentor, Coach Jim Stroker. Amazing human being, just very, very thankful, filled with gratitude. And Jim and I were talking, Jim, just to recap, some of the things we were saying before we just went live. What you and I are doing. I think in these conversations, you summarized really beautifully. In our last meeting, and you said, the work is about helping, giving hope, and inspiring people. And I thought, that really touched me. And I thought, that's I think really what you and I are about, and and what our conversations are about. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
that's great, and thank you. And I really believe that that the ability to inspire, give hope, or make someone believe they can do something bigger than what they can do is really all about, and again, a big part of our podcast today, I think, is all about storytelling. And for real, like I'm telling myself a story every day about who I am, the situation I'm in right now, and the people around me. There's a story. And Paul, you've got your story, and all the 25,000 people outside my window here in Ridgewood have their stories. But I think stories can flip and change. I think they can find new light and a new season by hearing about other stories. Now, let me just expound on that a little bit, because I think, we can, in one moment, through a story that we hear or that we might see, it can change our story like that. So I'm going to start you out with a story. Okay.
Yes,
So,
please.
so Paul's story is a story about a traveler that's marching out of a village way up in the mountains. And he's coming out, and kind of stumbling down. He's getting tired, and he's walking towards this other village, and he sees a monk. And he says to the monk, listen, can you tell me how far the next village is, the village down in the valley? And can you tell me what it's like? And the monk is, paused a little bit and says, well, before I tell you that, can you tell me where you're coming from? And the traveler says, well, I'm coming from, and he's still a little pissed off, Paul, coming from the village up in the mountains. And the monk says, well, what was it like? And the traveler says, it was horrible. Horrible. I mean, the people were rude. The people were just, they didn't care about anything. They didn't even speak my language. I mean, no one spoke my language. I asked for a place to sleep. They stuck me in the barn, and I had to sleep in the barn with the animals. The next morning I get up and they feed me this food. I don't know what the hell it was. It was some crazy stew they made up, and I just couldn't wait to get out of there. It was a horrible experience. Well, the monk looked at him and said, So, well, the village down in the valley is about 5 miles. As far as what it's like, I'm afraid you should be ready for much of the same. So the traveler puts his head down and walks into the valley. All of a sudden, about an hour and a half later, another traveler comes out of walking down the road, and he's whistling, and he's got a big smile on his face. He says, hey, sir, can you tell me how far is the village down there in the valley, and what's it like? Of course, the monk pauses, smiles back, and says, well, why don't you tell me what the village is like that you came from? And he said, incredible. one of the greatest experiences of my life. No one spoke my language. And we came up with this creative, innovative way of communicating with our hands and actually our facial expressions. And the people were just so kind and loving. And I had the greatest night's sleep of my life. I slept in this barn with an opening in the roof. I could see the full moon. In the middle of the night, one of the calves snuck up right next to me and laid down next to me. It's a sleep I'll never forget. And the food, these local spices they gave me, the taste, the fragrance, it was one of the greatest things I've ever done. Well, the monk said, with a big smile on his face, enjoy, because you've got much of the same coming your way right down, about a mile down the road. So, Paul, without giving you any clues, which you don't need, what does the story say to you, and how do you detangle it?
Yeah, Jim, I love it, Jim. That's a beautiful story. I have not heard that one before. You know, it makes me think about the power of our attitudes, our perceptions, and even maybe more powerfully, are we trying to see the good, you know, in situations, in people? You know, what are we looking for? And sometimes, you know, I think it's, you know, we see or we experience what we look for, or what we set out to perceive. You know, so if we're really sort of setting ourselves up for perceiving what we think is, you know, think of as negative, well, that's the perception that we're going to have. But if we come at it, you know, with this again, and I think gratitude weighs into this, you know, if we look at all of these events, you know, with this lens of gratitude, and say, you know, there is something wonderful in this. Let me find it. And so I think that's the, you know, that's what the monk for me is saying in that story is, you know, the nature of these villages. You know, it's not really about the nature of the villages. It's about the way you're perceiving, and the attitude, and the you know, the gratitude, and the willingness and the openness, you know, to find the good in these situations and people and things. That's the way I'm feeling it.
Love it. The great Tony Robbins talks about the RAS, reticular activation system, in your brain. There's a little portion of your brain that kind of is built on just what you're talking about, Paul. Whatever you're actually looking for, it will funnel in on those things and actually bring you there. And you know, after I read about this system, I teach yoga down at Long Beach Island, and actually someone texted me and said, "What is that reticular activation system?" And I had to explain it. And I said, it's kind of like if you decide to focus in on red cars when you're driving, and for the next 3 minutes during your drive, you try to spot and focus on those red cars. Paul, I saw 18 red cars. And yesterday I'm on the parkway, and I swear I wrote this down, and all of a sudden this red truck came past. Now, Paul, if I wasn't focused on red cars, it's funny, I would have said, I don't know, I don't see that many of them. Yeah. So, you know, the great Wayne Dyer said it beautifully when he said, when you change the way you see things, the things you see will change. So this mindset that we have, and Paul, it can be changed like that. Like all of a sudden you can become grateful because you win the lottery of life and you wake up. All of a sudden you can realize that, you know, there's good all around you if you search for it. So that's that first story, which I like. And I love your take on it.
Yeah, no, that's a great story, and I think it illustrates it so well. And yeah, I'm fascinated, Jim, by the science behind it that you're referencing here. Again, I had not heard of this. I just wrote down reticular activation system.
Yep.
right? This notion that, you know, if I guess if we have this concept, and I'm imagining this is the way it works, that if we have an image or a vision of what we're looking for, like you were saying, you know, the red cars, you know, suddenly we have this heightened ability to see all of this around us. You know, it's amazing. So what if we reframe that, you know, for seeing the good, you know, so that it's not necessarily about, you know, objects, you know, like you know, red trucks and things, but, you know, but seeing the good in people, right? Seeing the good in situations, you know.
Yeah. So this is all research based, laboratory based information that we can use, and it comes out of Martin Seligman's work at the University of Pennsylvania, and he is the father of positive psychology. And Seligman basically created this research project where he asked people that were suffering from a low level of well-being or mild depression to simply write down 3 things that they see that have gone well today. 3 things. You know the research. And I'm going to make this up. Like after like 2 weeks of writing down 3 things that they saw each day that were going well, that it actually changed their whole brain construction, and they actually became happier. And, you know, when we start to look for good things and it becomes a habit, then lo and behold, good things show up because so we know this is research based, and it's very interesting.
I love it. So this is fascinating. So I am familiar with the work of Martin Seligman as well. And I'll tell you just a little bit of a story. So some time ago, within the last few years, I was at a particular leadership training, and it was being facilitated. One of the facilitators is a fellow named Stephen Shields. He's with the Gallup organization, the organization that does the polling and so forth. And he was referencing the work of Martin Seligman, and specifically this book, Learned Optimism, by Seligman. And one of the really powerful takeaways that he shared with me, that Stephen Shields shared with me based on Seligman's work, was this notion that, and it's interesting because I'm going to add to what you said about, you know, bringing a certain attitude and a certain orientation to our perception. He was referencing this work by Seligman and saying the language that we use to describe situations, you know, and events and circumstances has power, right? And this notion that if we use what he was calling catastrophizing language, right, then we're really kind of making things worse for ourselves. We're actually creating for ourselves a bigger burden, you know, rather than using language that does not turn situations into negatives, right? But where we can really use language to help reframe situations. And I think, you know, the story that you shared, you know, this parable of the traveler, you know, and the monk, you know, I think it sort of illustrates that, you know, like when I think about, you know, like you were saying, like, you know, even simple things like, you know, the one traveler, you know, when the stew is served to that traveler, says, oh, you know, it was, you know, I'm not used to these flavors and these spices, and it was really horrible, and all of this. Whereas the other one, you know, says, you know, gee, you know, these maybe this traveler says, these flavors are new and interesting, right? Like, even if this traveler's not used to, right, these particular ingredients, the language, you know, that we use, you know, can inform the perception, right? And really inform the way we respond, you know, to the situation.
So let me blend into that story with another story, because I like stories, and usually stories go well with people's focus, right? So this is a story that occurred back on January 13th, 2007. And the Washington Post decided to come up with this experiment that happened to win a Pulitzer Prize. So what they did, they stuck a street musician at the busiest subway station in Washington, D.C. And they stuck this street musician at 7:15 in the morning. And they had him take his violin out and play his violin and stick his violin, case on the ground. And he was going to play the violin for 45 minutes. And they set up cameras to watch over 1,200 people go through that busy terminal while this guy's playing the violin. So he's playing, they start the cameras, he starts the violin, starts playing the violin like this. So it's 7:13 in the morning, and as you can imagine, people are just rushing and racing, and they got their hands in their, and they're looking at their cell phones, and they're battling for positions on the subway, and they're late to work, and speech, and this violin player is playing the violin. Well, after 45 minutes, they stop the cameras, and they record that during the 45 minutes, 31 people actually stopped and paused to hear the violin player. And $36.13 was put into the case, and $20 by one person. So that's the experiment. That's the story.
I love it.
But the story is a story that won the Pulitzer Prize because the violin player happened to be Joshua Bell, who at the time was the finest violin player in the world, who had come to Washington to play at the White House, was playing a $2.5 million Stradivarius violin that was created in 1713. It was this treasure going on right under their eyes, but we were running and racing. And so what's your take on this?
It's extraordinary, Jim. I'm processing it. It's amazing. What it makes me think about is, it's sort of like, how open are we, to observing what happens in our world, and when I say our world, I don't mean like the world writ large, but I mean just the things around us, and, it just makes me think, sometimes, if I'm in situations and, out and about, if I really open my perception, wow, look at the trees over there, and look at, the environment. I think about, you were referencing earlier, doing, leading yoga classes, on Long Beach Island. And I think I mentioned this in our last meeting, but it really merits, repeating. What really has struck me when I've attended those classes is not just that you're a great yoga instructor and you're, walking us through the poses and the breathing, and offering us inspiration, but you will call our perception to the environment, and you'll say, look at this gorgeous ocean and this pristine beach and this, beautiful sunrise that we had this morning. And, it's important that we open ourselves, to those perceptions. So the story that you share about the violin player, it makes me think about, how do we open our perceptions, and how do we orient our perceptions, for the good around us? How do we, and is it about the power to choose? Is it about the power to choose, not just our responses, but the way we perceive? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I will use the word awareness, that it's kind of a buzzword or catchy word, to heighten or broaden your awareness, to slow down and choose. Again, this is all the story you're telling. So I don't have time to slow down. I've got too many things that I've got to accomplish today. And even though I miss the little treasures, I'm under such pressure and stress to achieve that I might miss the big prize of the giant trophy award, the payoff that I'll get. So I can't slow down. And I think this is this, it's a real balancing act because, at what point are we willing to slow down and maybe not accomplish as much with that outcome, but enjoy the process more, and not so enthralled by this giant treasure chest that's waiting. And there's all kinds of research. It's a great one this weekend. Andrew Huberman has a great podcast. I don't know the name of it, but he's big time talking about dopamine. And dopamine is this incredible chemical that makes us feel this urge, this motivation, this striving to wake up. And I gotta, and this, when your dopamine level is up, you're like fired up, like I want to, and when it goes down to baseline, you're kind of a little bit flat. And then sometimes it dips below. And interesting, when you're in the process or procedure, that's when your dopamine's the highest. But when you actually get your or have the have the goal actually happen, guess what happens after that to your dopamine level? Like you hit your goal, and then what happens? So like we know this. It's the journey where all the gifts are. So slow down. Maybe you don't have to finish your book this week. Enjoy the process. So a lot of talk.
No, beautiful. I love it, Jim. So the things that were going through my mind and the notes I was jotting as you were sharing that, I thought about, all of us, I feel like on some level, all of us, we all experience stress. We all have busyness in our lives, busy lives, challenges, right? It's, I don't know that you can get through life without challenges. And at the same time, how can we open ourselves to the magic and the beauty of the journey, right? So you were saying, like, again, I just keep coming back to the story that you shared of the violin player, all of these folks who are commuting to work, that morning. Yes, they're busy, yes, they're rushing to work, but like you said, here's this world-class musician giving away a gift, right? Free for all to enjoy, if only for a moment, right? And so, how can we open ourselves, to those moments? And the thing I think about too is, it's not just opening ourselves so that we can experience the magic and the joy of the journey, but how can we give each other in those little moments? How can we give each other the gift? You and I have talked about, is it that much extra effort to hold the door open for the person walking into the Wawa, right? Is it that much effort to give a little smile, to the cashier who sells you that cup of coffee, or a little, hey, how's your day going? These are not extraordinary feats, for us to do. So, even amidst the challenge and the busyness and the stress of our lives, how can we enjoy the journey and for ourselves, and how can we give back to others? I mean, that's what it makes me think about.
Yeah. So the story piece, again, you hear a story and it changes your story, right? Because all of us are just really an acclamation or an accumulation of what's happened in our life, and the story that we construe out of that story. And we do have the choice to turn it into anything we want. And the story that I use it all the time. And it's the power. I have the luxury to talk to 4 school districts this week, starting out their school year. And these are teachers. And the teachers are going to get in front of kids and help them mold their stories. So the storyteller that actually became like an icon was a story that happened, if I could go to it, because I love it, up at Lake Placid in 1980. It's February 22nd, 1980. And the United States hockey team is getting ready to play the Soviet national team. And the Soviet national team has won the gold medal in 1976, 72, 68, and 64. They're pros. And this group of collegiate hockey players is waiting in the locker room, getting ready to get slaughtered because they had scrimmaged these guys in the Garden a month and a half before. The score was 16-3. The betting odds are 1,000 to 1 that they can win. So this guy walks in with a story. He tells a story, and that story changes a life and changes their. And what does he say? He says 4 things, Paul. He says, number 1, great moments are born from great opportunities. And that's what you have here tonight. So he's telling a story. This isn't an obstacle. It's an opportunity. This isn't a problem. It's a possibility. And these guys, they suddenly like peek up. Their chin comes off their chest. Then he says, number 2, he says, 1 game. If you play them 10 times, they might beat you 9, but not tonight, just 1 game. So he tells the boys, forget about that voice in your head. They're going, this might happen in the future. This happened in the past. It's just today. Be here mindfully. Then 3rd, he says, I'm sick and tired of hearing how good this team is. Tonight, you'll stay with them, skate with them, and shut them down because you can. Tonight, you're the greatest hockey team in the world.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, they're like, really? Have an identity switch. Act as if. And then finally, he sticks it to them and says, you were born to be hockey players. You were meant to be here tonight. This is your time. You know what happened, Paul? Those kids went out and they had 1,000 to 1 odds. They won 4-3 and created a miracle on ice. So if one person can change the lives of 23 kids every day, you, by what you say, how you give hope, inspiration to a kid, to a person in need, you could change everything. It can happen like that. And it did for you and I. We had mentors, we had teachers, we had hope coaches tell us, you can do this, Jim. And you're like, really? And that changed our life. So I'll stop talking. Go ahead.
No, that's amazing. I love that, and I'm familiar with that. That's Herb Brooks, right? Herb Brooks, the the hockey coach. Yeah, no, that extraordinary story. I'll tell you, Jim. You know what that really what sort of occurred to me as you were saying that. First of all, I was jotting down. I love you quoted that speech. Saying or some version of it saying, you can think of it as an obstacle, you can think of it as an opportunity, right? And again, the power of language, right? If we use the word obstacle, then how does our mind process this moment, right? It processes this moment as insurmountable, unconquerable. Where it's like this catastrophizing kind of language, right? If we use the word opportunity, now the way we conceptualize the situation is, wow, the sky's the limit, right? This is I'm inspired. This is an opportunity. I want to take this opportunity. I want to bring my best to this opportunity, and we're going to win this hockey game tonight. So it's remarkable, and I agree with you. And it makes me think about this idea of be your best version. This idea, when you were referencing before and saying, we have many different selves, or we can think about who we are in many different ways, and I think about, we can choose the best version of ourselves. We can bring that best version of ourselves for ourselves and for everyone else, for our fellow brothers and sisters and people in this world. And part of that is, part of trying to be my best self is let me try to use the language, which really frames things, as opportunities, really frames things so that we're seeing the good, again, like in your story of the traveler and the monk. So I think it's powerful, it really is.
So let me shift gears just a little bit. Now I'll stop storytelling because that can get old. So I heard a great podcast this weekend, and Brene Brown is a pioneer and really has, her TED Talk just it's one of the top 10 TED Talks ever on vulnerability, and just so good. She's in a little bantering contest with Tim Ferriss, another podcast guru, and they're really talking about the line, the really it's an uncomfortable line between complacency and self-acceptance. So self-acceptance to say, look, I'm enough. Look, I'm 70 years old. I've been through a lot of stuff. Let me just put my feet up, relax now, be more mindful, read a good book, and meander down to the diner down here and have a sandwich, go on upstairs, take a nap, and I'm enough. So where is that balance, Paul, between self-acceptance and complacency?
I love it, Jim. So you know what that made me think of, and I'm going to respond to that is, one of the absolute classics, the book Mindset by Carol Dweck, right? Yeah. And the key takeaway, I think, for me, and I think for many, is fixed mindset versus growth mindset, right? And for me, the fixed mindset in response to what you're saying is, well, this is who I am. I'm not a very patient person, right? I'm using this language to describe myself, and just sort of settling, for this version of myself, rather than saying, instead of bringing this fixed mindset, I'm going to try to bring a growth mindset. And I think where that, sort of where that balance is, we don't want to beat ourselves up for the times that we stumble and can be better. We're all going to stumble and have these moments where we're not our best versions, and that's part of being human. But rather than stay in that place and beat ourselves up about it, we can look at it and say, what is there for me to learn from this? Where are the growth opportunities for me in this? How can I bring a growth mindset to this and be kind to myself in terms of, I'm on a journey, and, one of the most important parts of that journey is I'm committed to continually trying to be my best version. I'm not always going to achieve it, right? I'm going to sometimes, I'm going to fall down, and I'm going to wish I could have done better, but I'm going to use those experiences as learning opportunities toward my continued growth. So for me, that's that line between the complacency and the growth.
Yeah, I mean, we're all different. Anybody that's watching this is probably a high achiever, or takes pride in saying that they, and I think that the game today, I had an amazing conversation with a current Navy SEAL this weekend out of Hawaii, who's just shipping out for 3 more months. And, again, talk about people who are driven, right? And he's working now with finding balance, which talk about, that's a pretty tough balancing act, to be out on a mission where you're literally, you could be killing people where it needs to be done. Then you come home and hug your kids and find a balance between actualization daily, joy, self-care. It'd be so much easier if it was just black and white, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost easier to run until you fall off the treadmill, or just lay down all day and, go to Aruba and put your feet up. But it really is, as I guess it should be, as Dr. Seuss would say, a great balancing act,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And, Jim, as we start to wind down for this morning, one of the things that makes me think about, and we talked about a little bit last time, is and you and I were talking about earlier this morning, I keep coming back to this concept of the yin and the yang, right? This notion of, the classic Chinese philosophy of yin and yang, which is, two forces which are, they seem oppositional, but in fact they're balanced and they're complementary, and together they make the whole. And I use that analogy to think about this balance between self-care and personal wellness on the one hand, and service to others and to our world on the other hand. And I think it really, ideally, it should be this continuous cycle, right? Of, I want to do the practices, which are really about me and my self-care. But if that's all I do, then it's not a balanced life. If I'm not giving back, if I'm not returning, if I'm not serving others and trying to make the world a better place, and supporting others in being their best selves and in their wellness, right? Then it's not balanced, and it's not it's less effective, and it's less productive. And I think the other extreme is true also. If we're exclusively about giving to others, and we're doing nothing to recharge ourselves, right? To fill ourselves, to care for ourselves, then we burn out, right? And it's very noble, to give to others, but if we don't do the self-care stuff, and the personal wellness stuff, Stephen Covey, said, sharpen the saw, right? In the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the last, for me, that's he used, I think that was his 7th habit. I think for me, that's like the first habit, right? Is, hey, sharpen the saw so that you can do this other work. That's not, not necessarily about yourself. So, for me, that's the balance. And that's the way I think about it. Yeah.
So I'll finish up. YTAWYWBYAA. I'm sorry, I screwed up. Too many numbers. Well, I love this one. So one of the greatest motivational speakers in the history of motivation, and just a giant article in the record here. He's known all over the world. Dr. Rob Gilbert. He usually finishes up and he holds up a $50 bill, holds it up, and says, "How many people want this?" Right? And of course, and he goes, "No. How many people really, really want this?" Come on, how many people really, really, really? And he keeps going with the really, really one. Holds up the 50. All of a sudden, Paul, usually after about a minute, somebody runs up, takes the 50, and goes there. He goes, "Finally." He says, "Your thoughts are what you want, but your actions are what you'll get." So, all this is blah, blah, blah. It's just all theory unless you put it into practice, and actions speak louder than words. So I hope just one thing landed today, because you fed me. This was like a buffet from some of the stuff you gave me today that I can actually put into action. So great job.
Thank you, sir. Well, likewise, brother. Yeah, you as well. You have filled me. You offered me many, many things to think about, and the stories. Even though you were saying, stories are stories. Stories have power, and the stories that you share, there are powerful takeaways there, and I will continue to think about them today. So thank you.
Great. Yeah, that's our job, is to give you hope, inspiration, and belief, so that you change your story if you happen to have a story right now that's not serving you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Coach.
All right, Coach. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Namaste.
Namaste to you, Coach.
All right. Thank you, brother. Take care.